to thank Trent for leading those songs for us. He got up here, and I was taken back to high school. Me and Trent would do little devotionals together, and Trent would lead singing, and I would give a short little talk. And now we get to both be part of this service Sunday morning in this manner, these two different roles. And we know now, we've made some type of progress since high school. We know now. But I thank him, and I thank each and every one of you for being here this morning and the opportunity that you've given me to worship with you and praise God together. This morning, we're going to be talking about battling anxiety and what all that means. To give you kind of an analogy to kind of get us in the right mindset of the way I want to go about this morning, I don't immediately just want to turn to Philippians 4:6 and read it. I want to work our way up to that point, use some Old Testament examples, and then talk about it, and then go back to another Old Testament example when someone had to do what Philippians 4:6 says. To not be anxious for anything, but with prayer and supplication, make your request be known to God. We're going to get to that eventually. But to better give you in this mindset, I just want to tell you about how the past 2 weeks, all the stuff that's just happened in my life, just in the past 2 weeks. And I say this not for you to worry about me. I know I have a lot of mothers and grandmothers here that do worry about me a lot. I don't need anything. I got it all taken care of. It's all fine. Tomorrow it's all going to be over, and I'm going to get to be able to move on. I appreciate that you worry about me, but that's not the purpose of me explaining this. What I want you to do instead is when I'm explaining to you my past couple of weeks, think about your own past couple of weeks. Have you had the stress? Have you had the responsibilities thrown upon you? Or have you had a time in your life, or a time that's going to happen in your life, where you just have so many things you have to get done that you realize there are not enough hours in the day to get it all done? 2 weeks ago, I started because I had a weekend study back in Prattville that I needed to be a part of, and I went down there Saturday and I taught that. Then we had my gospel meeting. I had a gospel meeting in Elliottsville the next weekend after that. So it was back-to-back teaching, preaching, what I'm supposed to do. What I didn't know is that this was also going to be midterm week. So not only am I preaching a college study and a gospel meeting, but I also have 5 midterms that I need to take. And I took 3 last week, and I have 2 that I have to take tomorrow. So after this, I have to change gears and start studying for those 2 midterms. Not only that, but we had our gospel meeting this past couple of weeks, didn't we? And of course, all of that was exciting and great to be a part of. But again, it's something that I need to take care of. I needed to be here, and I had that responsibility to be here and take part in that with each and every one of you. All good things, but just things that had to get done. 2 Saturdays ago, before I went to this weekend study in Prattville, I totaled my car. So it's just like one other thing that I had to take care of. And of course, everybody was okay. Everything's fine. But not only doing that, but I had to deal with the insurance companies and the credit union. And then I had to go out and buy a new car, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just something that had to be done. And then as well, past Wednesday, my uncle passed away. So I had to go and be with the family last Saturday. And I got back home late at night, real late at night. And now I'm able to be here with you and do this sermon. And I unloaded on Miss Peggy Knoll. I saw her and I told her all about what's going on in my life. And then I looked at her and I said, I know what I'm going to preach on Sunday morning. I'm going to talk about anxiety. And there's 2 reasons why God teaches us how to deal with anxiety. There's 2 reasons why that I can think of that God takes the time to tell us how to deal with stress. And one is because He loves us. And He wants us to have the best possible life, get the most out of it as we can. And He wants to take care of us in that matter. The other reason I thought of is because when you are living an anxious life, when you have a lot of things going on, not only is God going to present you with a solution how to handle that, but the world is going to give you solutions as well. And the majority of those solutions that the world's going to offer you, that Satan's going to offer you, is sinful solutions. So what it is God offers you a better way to handle your stress and your anxiety so you won't turn to Satan and look for those other solutions. And we're going to talk about those as we go through this. So we're going to explain battling anxiety. Before we read this psalm that I have behind me, what I want to first do is establish the fact that each one of us has responsibilities. We have been put on this earth, and because Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, Adam had to work. And Eve had things that she had to do too. We have responsibilities. And let's turn to the book of Proverbs. So I want to read to you very quickly 5 proverbs that establish this fact. The majority of them saying, do you want to eat bread? Do you want to have something to eat? If you want to have something to eat and to live on this earth, you have to work. There are things, we have earthly responsibilities. We have to take care of business. Proverbs 10:4. He who has slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Turn over to chapter 12. Chapter 12, verse 11. 12:11, whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense. He who works his land will have enough to eat, but he who's pursuing worthless things, that doesn't even make any sense. Proverbs 12, verse 24. The hand of the diligent will rule, but the lazy man will be put into forced labor. Some of your versions say that he will become a slave because he's become a lazy man. Proverbs 13:4, just one chapter over, verse 4. The soul of the lazy man desires, it has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich. Now to chapter 14. Chapter 14, verse 23. In all labor there is profit, but idle chatter leads only to poverty. We all must labor so we can profit and so we can eat. We have these earthly responsibilities. And to have a little bit of anxiety and a little bit of stress and a little bit of urgency that these are things that we have to get done, that's not a bad thing. Why did I get up in the morning and go to work? Why do I get up in the morning and go to school? Why do I get morning and do all those things? Because I need to eat. That's why I get up in the morning and do those things. And you see here in Proverbs that it's basic wisdom. Wise people understand this. We have earthly responsibilities and we have to take care of business. Now, when the problem comes up and when it comes into true anxiety that the Bible talks about is when a lot of these things start to build up. And they're not always bad things. It's just things that have to get done. And as I said at the beginning, you have that situation and you look at it and you go, there are not enough hours in the day to take care of all the things that I need to take care of this week. So what do we do? And the world's going to offer all these different things. The world's going to offer all these terrible things to take care of that problem. But God gives us a solution in Psalm 16. So let's go turn over back to the book of Psalms, and I want to read now Psalms 16. Psalm 16 solutions. I'm going to read this whole psalm. It's only 11 verses, and we'll come back and we'll make some points. Verse 1 of Psalm 16, preserve me, O God, for in you I put my trust. O my soul, you have said to the Lord, you are my Lord. My goodness is nothing apart from you. As for the saints who are on the earth, they are the excellent ones in whom is all my delight. Their sorrows shall be multiplied who hasten after another God. They drink offerings of blood I will not offer, nor take their names on my lips. O Lord, you are the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You maintain my lot. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Yes, I have a good inheritance. I will bless the Lord who has given me counsel. My heart also instructs me in the night seasons. I have set the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad, and my glory rejoices. My flesh also will rest in hope. For you will not leave my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. You will show me the paths of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Now, customarily, when we read this passage, we think about David running from Saul. And we think, a lot of people think, hey, this is probably when David wrote this psalm. He was fleeing from Saul. Saul was after his life for no good reason. David was perfectly innocent. Yet, what did he have to do to handle that situation? Verse 1, he's going to trust in God. Preserve me, O God. I'm going to put my trust in you. You're going to be my refuge. So, number one, first thing David is going to do, he's going to put all his trust and hope in God in that situation. And it's a big psalm. There's a lot of points that we could bring out of this. I'm just going to bring out 3 major points with you this morning. The first one I want to bring out is what he talks about in verse 3 and verse 4. The sorrows in verse 4 shall be multiplied who hasten after another God. Their drink offerings of blood I will not offer, nor take up their names on my lips. And I love that this attitude that David displays in verse 3 and verse 4. In verse 4, David is not afraid to call out evil. And this is something that causes us a lot of stress and anxiety in our lives. There's a lot of evil in this world, isn't there? And it's something that we constantly worry about, and it's something that adds on to all the responsibilities we already have. Because we do also have the responsibility to go out and teach people about Jesus, right? And so when we see all the evil in the world, I could worry, am I not doing enough? I'm worried about all these people out there. And I know each and every one of you, a lot of you also worry about all the evil in the world. And that's because I'm friends with you on social media, and I see a lot of y'all post about it every day. And say, look at the things going on here, look at the things going on here. There's so much evil in this world. Now, if you look at an unbalanced, have a worldview that's unbalanced, and you only focus on all the evil in the world in verse 4 and call out, which is a good thing to do that, but if that's what you only do, how stressful is your life going to be? It's going to be very stressful if you only focus on all the evil in the world. And that's why David has a balanced worldview here. Because we get so consumed with verse 4, do we forget about verse 3? And for the saints who are on all the earth, they are the excellent ones, whom is all my delight. Yes, I'm going to call out the evil people in the world. I'm going to call out those that go after foreign gods. I'm not going to be a part of them. I'm not going to give blood sacrifices to them. But also, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to delight in the saints. There's a lot of good people in this world. There's a lot of bad people in this world. There's also a lot of good people in this world. There's a lot of saints sitting around you right now that you should take delight in. We're going through all these responsibilities. I'm not going to get so consumed about all the evil in the world and forget about all the good brethren around me. That's something to be happy about. That's something to post on our social media about. There's a lot of good things going on at Gardendale right now, aren't there? A whole lot of good things. And to have this balanced, focused view and to have the attitude David here has in Psalms 19, yes, there's bad people out there. There's a lot of bad people that are after me. Saul's after me. But guess what? There's also a lot of saints to delight in. A whole lot of saints. And right there handles that anxiety. There's a lot of good people in this world that I can focus on as well. Eventually, we're going to talk about verse 7 and verse 8, but I want to skip down to the end. Verse 10 and verse 11. For you will not leave my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. This is something that takes away our anxiety as well, this fact here. Sheol is just, under my understanding, is another word for Hades. It's an Old Testament word for where you go when you die. And in the Old Testament, they didn't understand heaven and hell like we do. They didn't have the teachings like we do in the New Testament to understand those things. So you have men like David, who's faithful, and they don't really understand where they go when they die. I know I'm going to die. I know I'm going to go somewhere. But David still had this confidence. I'm not going to be abandoned in Sheol. I'm not going to die. My soul's just going to be left there. No, your Holy One will not see corruption. And here's some Bible trivia that you really, really need to know. Who better explains this passage in the New Testament? Peter better explains this passage in Acts chapter 2. We won't turn there, but that's his first sermon, right? He gets up there and he explains this passage. He reads it out for him. Because he explains that, of course, yes, this is an application for David, but this is a prophecy for Jesus Christ. That he was not abandoned in Sheol. He didn't die, and his body was not corrupted in the flesh. Jesus' body never got to return to the dust for which it came because he was raised back from the dead. What better encouragement is there than the Holy One has not seen corruption? That Jesus has raised from the dead. You want to focus on something when you have all these responsibilities? Guess what? Jesus has raised from the dead. The Holy One has not seen corruption. And what's the application that we can take from that? Those of us that have called on the name of the Lord, those that have repented and be baptized, those that put the Lord first in our lives, guess what? Our soul isn't going to be abandoned to Sheol. Our soul's not going to be abandoned. He is taking care of us. And He will raise us up at His pre-appointed time. And when you have saints who put God first, who do not fear death, who are not anxious about death because they know of the promises God has made to us, if you're not anxious about death, is there anything to be anxious about? No, you would think that would be the big one. But as Christians, we don't have to be anxious about that at all because of who Jesus is and because of what He has done for us. We get in these stressful situations and our friends in the world try to encourage us. And they're great. I'm happy that they try to encourage us. And they'll slap me on the shoulder and say, hey man, it's not the end of the world. Say something like that. Really good friends will sing you the Orphan Annie song, right? The sun will come out tomorrow. Really good friends will sing you that song. But as Christians, could it be the end of the world tomorrow? Will the sun come out tomorrow? I don't know. I don't know if it will. Tomorrow, Jesus might come back. He might. And even then, is that something I need to be anxious about? Well, if I'm living the life I should, if I'm putting God first, this isn't something I need to be anxious about. It's going to be a good day tomorrow. I don't even have to be anxious about the judgment. And immediately when I thought, I said, what would happen if the Lord come back tomorrow? Really the first thing that popped in my mind is, well, I won't have to take those midterms tomorrow. And even from that perspective, guess what? When Jesus comes back, when we're all transformed into something better, God gives us that spiritual body, and for eternity we're going to get to bask in His light. There's going to be no more anxieties. There's going to be nothing to worry about. In Proverbs, we have to labor. Adam has to go out and toil the ground. There's things that he has to get done. All those responsibilities will be over. Every single one of them. Because we will be back in a spiritual garden with our Father. And that's not something I'm anxious about. That's something I look forward to. I'm okay if the Lord comes back tomorrow. Because I'm anxious for nothing. Now, let's look at this last point that I have here, but it's in the middle point in the psalm. And I want to use this to transfer us into a next point. Verse 8. I've set the Lord always before me, because He is at my right hand. I shall not be moved. Let's look at this first part here. I have set the Lord always before me. Well, how are you going to set the Lord always before you? I believe there's a lot of good answers. You know, Bible study, that would be setting the Lord before you. Meditating on those things are pure, that those things are noble, that would be setting the Lord before you in all things. But you look at it from a Philippians 4 perspective, Philippians 4:6, how do you always set the Lord before you? Well, I believe that would be prayer. Prayer would be a direct example of you setting the Lord before you in all things. And here's the passage that we cross-stitch on our pillows and we print out to always keep. Philippians 4:6-7. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. How am I going to set the Lord before me? Well, I'm going to pray. And I'm going to let my request be known to God. I'm going to go to God in prayer, and I'm going to tell Him about all the things that are happening to me this week. You know, before I go complain to Miss Peggy and explain everything to her, which is something I may do, something that's going to help me in a way, first, I'm going to let God know about everything that's going on in my life. And I'm going to do that with thanksgiving. With the mindset that I'm already thankful that He has already done so much already for me. The big one, of course, being that He has sent Jesus to be raised from the dead so I don't have to be anxious about the world coming to an end or my death. I'm going to come to Him in thanksgiving, but I'm going to let my requests be known to Him. And what is God going to do for me? The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. A peace that the world cannot possibly understand. That me, myself, I cannot really possibly wrap my head around this peace. but I know it works. And that peace of God, it guards my heart and it guards my mind through Jesus Christ. That's what God offers me, how to handle my anxieties. And I know a problem for me is I don't always go to God in prayer about the things going on in my life. And in that situation, I have the ideas. Of course, I believe in God. Of course, I know He's there. But I think that He already knows about all the things that are going on in my life. And maybe that's the way we treat it. Instead of going to God and saying, God, this is going on, I need your help with this. I want to be thankful for all these things you've already given me, but I do need your help in this situation. I say, well, God already understands. And I put God over here. I'm going to let God do His thing for me, and I'll worry about me. And I just completely ignore the prayer part. Now, of course, that goes against Philippians 4. That goes directly against Philippians 4. He says, with prayer and supplication, let your requests be known to God. But also, by having that attitude, is that putting the Lord first? Back in Psalm 16? That's not putting the Lord first. That's putting the Lord over here. Lord, I know you're going to take care of me, but I'm going to let you deal with what you deal with, and I'm going to deal with either. Just completely ignore it. That is not putting the Lord first. We must go to God in prayer. And we must let Him know about the big things going on in our lives. We must let Him know about the little things going on in our lives. And I'm not saying in this passage doesn't promise that He changes our lives to make it fit the way we want it to fit. But He gives us the peace of God to handle any situation, any responsibility that we have in the world. We must put the Lord first in all things. That next part of the verse, at the end of verse 8, it says, we've set the Lord always before me, because He is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Maybe some of your versions say, I shall not be shaken. And you can look at this from the perspective of, well, I'm not going to be shaking. I'm not going to be worried about the things of this world because I've set the Lord before me. That would be a logical explanation. The Lord's before me, I'm not worried. But also as well, it means we're not going to move away from the Lord. And as I said at the beginning, the world gives us a lot of solutions for our anxiety. And that's one of the reasons why God gave us Philippians 4, 6, and 7. So that we can combat all these other solutions that the world gives me to handle my problems in this world. And I'm going to go through these in just a second. But if I put the Lord first, I'm not going to be moved. These things I'm not going to go towards. I'm not going to move over here to this particular sin to solve the solution, because God has already solved the solution for me by giving me the peace of God. And let's give me just a few examples. Of course, this isn't all of them, but here's just a few. Number one, I thought of, what would be a simple solution that could solve all your problems? Worldly perspective. What from a worldly perspective could solve all your problems? Well, if Satan was going to give me a solution, number one, I think he'd give me money. Andrew, you know what would solve all your problems? You need money. You need a lot of money. And when we learned in 1 Timothy 6, the love of money is the root of all evil, I can begin to love money so much that I just fall into sin and it turns into greed. Money isn't going to solve all your problems, is it? When death comes, when the resurrection of the dead, can you write Jesus a check? That isn't going to work, is it? And even in those things, but just the daily things in life, even people that have money have things they have to deal with. This doesn't solve anything. But it's going to be a solution that Satan's going to offer me. And some people take this solution. I'm going to abandon my family. I'm going to abandon all the responsibilities I have to the Lord. The chief one that we always bring up is not forsaking the assembly. I'm going to abandon all those responsibilities, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make the most money possible so I can deal with my anxieties. That is not a solution. And then eventually that love of money grows and grows and grows, and you've got people that will lie and cheat and steal, do whatever they have to do to have the most amount of money. This is not a solution. I would rather put the Lord first so I would not be moved into something like greed. Lie, cheat, and steal, what does that go into? That's another sinful solution. Deceit. Proverbs 20:17 just says the man that acquires bread through deceit is first sweet, but then eventually that bread tastes like gravel because you didn't really work for it, you didn't really deserve it, and that's what that bread becomes, it's gravel. You just want to spit it out. People will lie to deal with their anxieties. common problem. How many people in this world suggest and encourage you call your boss and tell him you're sick because you have a lot on your plate when you're not really sick? Even that may be considered a white lie. It's still a lie. It's still deceit. It's still receiving bread deceitfully. That too is a sin, but that's a sinful opportunity. That's a sinful solution to deal with your anxieties. Now, of course, we can call our bosses and say, look, I have a lot on my plate, and I probably need a day to handle all these situations. I would understand you may have an understanding boss that can handle that, but that would be honesty. That would be the opposite of deceit. To get out of responsibility, you simply lie. That's a sinful solution, which does not include the peace of God. Sinful pleasures in general. You're anxious about something, you're stressed about something, so you look for other things to help you forget about the things going on in your life. Alcohol, drugs, sexual immorality, all three of those things would dull your mind so you don't have to worry about the things going on in your life. And you know people that have gone down that path, or if you've gone down that path yourself, you know that the end of that road, all you've done is cause more problems and more things that you have to deal with. Because now you become addicted to something that now you have to take the opportunity to get off of. All this does is add more work and keeps you from doing the work that you do need to do. Those are things that is a sinful opportunity. And I debated on putting this up here or not. But I was thinking of another sinful pleasure that we resort to when we become anxious. What about gluttony? Can food become an idol? Food can become an idol. And I know jokingly we talk about stress eating. And I don't know if stress eating technically would be an idol. You would have to take it to a level that it would become an idol. But food can be an idol. And people try to forget about their problems by just engorging on food. Everything can become an idol that's not God, can it? And gluttony would be a sinful pleasure that would be a sinful solution to anxiety. Two more. You could just resort to full-out laziness. And I believe this is the one that tempts me. The couch. The couch can become an idol, can it? I have all these responsibilities I need to take care of. You know what? I'm just going to ignore those responsibilities, and I'm going to lay on the couch, and I'm going to watch TV. That, too, is a sinful solution to the problem. Just simply ignoring the problem. That's a sinful solution. That doesn't include the peace of God, and that has nothing absolutely to do with prayer. If you're being lazy, prayer, happens when you're not being lazy. Lazy people don't pray. Hopefully we are not those people. And here's my last one for these sinful solutions. And this is something I want to take very, very seriously. But some people take their life. And I've been trying to look at different statistics about this. But you have a third of the adolescents end up taking their life, of those that commit suicide, because of the stress and anxiety they have in their life. This is a sinful solution that Satan tempts people with. And it's very, very serious. All of these things are serious, but this is very serious as well. That people see this as a way out. And of course, I can tell you that your life is sacred. Shedding innocent blood, whether it's somebody else or your own, is a sin. That is wrong. That Jesus has a plan for you to be a faithful servant on this earth for the time that he has set up. Not on your time, but on his time. And all of doing this, taking your own life and seeing this as a way out, would be going against what Jesus has in mind for you in every single way. And I'm not going to just say that, this is just too far away to actually be a temptation. There's probably more people in here that have been tempted by this, or maybe personally are being tempted by this right now. If this is you, it is a sinful solution. It is not what God has in mind for you. It doesn't go as completely against Philippians 4, 6, and 7. If you feel this way, I would encourage you to talk to someone. Talk to someone you trust and make sure you get some help that you need. Because this is a type of temptation, and all these temptations are not something that you need to handle alone. You don't have to handle it alone. Delight in the saints around you and make sure you talk to someone. And make sure that you can first go to God in prayer and let him know that this is a temptation, and then also talk to people and get help. So this no longer becomes a temptation and you don't see it as a simple solution anymore. But instead, go to God in prayer and resort in the peace of God which surpasses all understanding. here for this last point. And there's a lot to do. This is in the end. I'm nowhere near the end. Closer, but nowhere near. But I want to look at David. And I want to look at a time in his life when he was in a very, very stressful situation. And I don't actually want to look at when he's running from Paul. I want to look at 1 Chronicles 14. 1 Chronicles 14. And just like I did with me at the beginning, let me explain to you all the stuff that's going on in David's life right now. There's a whole lot of going on in his life. I don't have an exact timetable here, but I do know that it was pretty close together. To pick up actually in 1 Chronicles 10, Saul and Jonathan both die on the battlefield. And it says there in chapter 10, in verse 14, that the reason why Saul dies, but he did not inquire of the Lord, therefore he killed him and turned the kingdom over to David, the son of Jesse. Number one, David has been running from Saul. That's what he had to deal with. He was running for his life. But now, Saul took his life. Like we just talked about, Saul went after a sinful solution to having the arrows in his back and to losing on the battlefield. He did take his life. So now, David, we see, is mourning because Saul and Jonathan both are dead. And we read about that in 2 Samuel chapter 1, that he mourns. So that's the second thing he has to deal with. He's having to mourn the loss of one of his very, very best friends. If we continue reading now that David has become king, he now has kingly responsibilities that he has to take care of. Chapter 11, he takes over Jerusalem. That's the third thing that David has to deal with. He sets up Jerusalem as the capital, and he leaves Joab. I don't know why I forgot that. He leaves Joab there to finish the reconstruction of Jerusalem. So that's the third thing that David has to deal with. From here on out, he gives the role of who's with him. Then the fourth thing I had is that he basically unifies the kingdom. And that's what we see in chapter 12. That he sees who is loyal to David, make sure, okay, y'all all recognize me as I'm king now. So he has to make sure the kingdom is unified under David as king. Now what's the next thing in chapter 13 that David has to deal with? Number 5, he's concerned about the Ark of the Covenant. According to Samuel, it's been sitting in Kirjath Jearim for 20 years. And that's a good story that we like about. We don't like that the Israelites were being foolish and the Philistines caught the captive ark and tried to keep it. But the Ark of the Covenant was there in the temple with Dagon, the Philistine god. And God keeps on messing with the idol, doesn't he? He first knocks it over one night, then he breaks the face and the hands. And eventually he just strikes the Philistines all with tumors. So the Philistines release the Ark of the Covenant by this milking cow, and it ends up back in the possessions of the Israelites. But it's not where it's supposed to be. It's somebody's house. So David realizes he needs to go and get this ark. I need to go get this. I need to return it to the place it needs to be. But he does it the wrong way. Even though he has a good purpose, it's like he skips numbers in his daily Bible reading, and he just didn't know that he was supposed to get a certain family of the Levites to carry that artifact. But he doesn't, and it ends up Uzzah, a man simply trying to stable it because they're carrying it the wrong way, dies because God is holy and God made a law. So now, the fifth thing, well, I guess I would add that to the sixth thing. Not only was it carrying the ark wrong, but the sixth thing is a man's life. He's dead because David made a poor decision. The seventh thing is at the beginning of chapter 14. David starts trying to build a house for his family. And now, of you, those that have built a house, you know that is a very stressful thing that has to be taken care of. David was trying to build him a house. And now let's look at the eighth thing, which is all the Philistines decide to come up against David. A lot of things happen in these few chapters, and this is just the icing on the cake. Verse 8, we're going to read verse 8 through 17 of 1 Chronicles 14. Now when the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over all Israel, all the Philistines went up to search for David. And David heard of it and went out against them. Then the Philistines went and made a raid on the valley of Rephaim. And David inquired of God, saying, "Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand?" The Lord said to him, "Go up, for I will deliver them into your hand." So then when they went up to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them, David said, "God has broken through my enemies by the hand like a breakthrough of water." Therefore they called the name of the place Baal Perazim. And when they left their gods there, David gave a commandment, and they were all burned with fire. Then the Philistines once again made a raid on the valley. Therefore David inquired again of God, and said to him, "You shall go up to after them." Circle around them and come up upon them in front of the mulberry trees. And it shall be when you hear a sound of marching of the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall go out into battle. For God has gone out before you shall strike the camp of the Philistines. So as David did as God commanded, and they drove back the army of the Philistines from Gibeon as far as Gezer. Then the fame of David went out into all the lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him upon all nations. It's important to bring out how many Philistines went up against David once they found out he had just been anointed king. Well, he just became king. All the Philistines came up against David. All of them. And they come into this valley and they begin to raid the valley. So David's trying to build his house. David has all these other stuff he's trying to take care of. I imagine that he was trying to get the tents built for the new tabernacle to move the ark the correct way back to that place. And all the Philistines have come up against him. And maybe for him, this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. This is just too much I have to deal with. But what does David do? Well, we see there in verse 10. David inquired of God. Just like Philippians 4, 6, and 7. David went and prayed to God. This is what's on my plate. What should I do? Do you deliver them into my hands? And God says yes. So he goes and he pushes them back and he burns their idols. But guess what? The Philistines come back for a second time in the valley. So what does David do? Does he just go after them because he already knows that God has delivered them into him already before? No, David actually inquires again of God. And God says, I don't want you to go directly against them, but I want you to come under these mulberry trees, and I want you to wait until you hear marching at the top of the trees, and then you attack. Gives them something specific of what to do in this situation. But both times, David takes the time to inquire of God in prayer and makes a supplication, and he has a request that he makes known to God. Just like Philippians 4 says. I imagine that David also was presented with sinful solutions. It was not recorded here, but there could have been sinful solutions that David could have been tempted with. David could have increased taxation on the Israelite people. He could have become greedy, couldn't he? I'm going to handle this Philistine problem and all these things I have to deal with by getting more money. David could have invested in new technologies, chariots and horses, which is something earlier in the Torah that God tells them not to do. I don't want you to put your faith in chariots and horses. I want you to put your faith in me. David could have gone after all these different things to solve this problem. David could have said, it could put it pride, trusted in himself. You know what? I'm David. I killed Goliath when I was only a boy. I'm just going to go after these people. I'll just deal with it on my timetable. I'll take care of it. That's not what David does. David inquires of God. And if David, king of Israel, one who the Lord brought the fear of all nations upon, if he decides that he needs to pray, he needs to inquire of God before he takes care of something, I know that Andrew Smith, with all of his little problems, I need to inquire of God as well. And that is what's going to solve my problems, by putting the Lord first. And what does God do? God drives back the army of the Philistines. God solves the problem. Because David put the Lord first, and he was not moved. That is the way that God teaches us how to handle our anxieties, so we don't have to look for any other solution. It's already right here, written out in these books. As always, I appreciate your close attention. And let me ask you, have you put the Lord first in your life? Because there is a great day coming. As I talked about, we don't know when that time's going to be, but it could be tomorrow. And if you haven't put the Lord first, if Jesus hasn't saved you yet, that's something you do need to be anxious about. That is something that you do need to worry about. But what Jesus would rather have, and what each and every one of us would rather have, would to have someone leave this building this morning that's not anxious, that doesn't have to worry about tomorrow. Because they know that even if the world ends tomorrow, they're going to get to sit in God's light and praise God together in heaven, if that's what God decides to do. If you are ready to put the Lord first in your life, and there's any way we can help